Hello everyone. My name is Lydia and that is Sophie. We got some spooky lighting kind of in here now because it's storming today. So that's fun. That's kind of fun. As you can tell, I was out in the rain. We were both out in the rain, so she's licking her paws and trying to get a little drier than I got her. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about this book I read the other day. So I have a lot of Reader's Digests at home, a lot of old ones, like from the 70s. There might be some of them that are even older than the 70s. But like this one is 1977. And it's kind of crazy. I don't know if just my town is like this. Maybe your town is like this too. But whenever I go to thrift stores, we can actually find quite a bit of these in the thrift stores. And every once in a while I just pick one up because like they are a good read, sure, but they're also so beautiful. Like, look, I mean, you just imagine a full shelf of different colored ones, and that's what we have, like a shelf full of just, and even the front is quite beautiful. So it's kind of fun to pick these up, and sometimes you find a cute read. Oh, I love the flower detail. I didn't even know there were flowers. Oh, I love that. So on the shelf, I have a whole bunch of these sitting, and it was interesting because I just was like, I really want to read tonight, and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to read. I might have just finished The Confederacy of Dunces at that point, or maybe I hadn't wanted to quite read it yet. I don't remember, but I saw this sitting there and I was like, the dragon, because see, these are the titles on this book. There's Tisha, the dragon, Oliver's story, Majesty, Elizabeth II, and the House of the Windsor. That's all one title. And Overboard. And so when I saw this, I was like, the dragon, that sounds exciting. I want to read a story about a dragon. So I turned to it, and it ended up not being about a dragon at all. It was like some sort of like war machinery called the dragon, and I was like, ew, I don't want to read about the war. I don't want to read about that. Which, I mean, maybe it's a good story. I shouldn't knock it. I'm just saying, like, for me at the time, I was thinking fantasy, and I turned to that. I was like, what? I don't want to read that. Come on, you know. And I'm sure it could be a very good book. I don't know, but and then I was just sort of flipping through it to see like what piqued my interest, and I saw Tisha. The one of the books on here is called Tisha. I want to show what the art looks like for it. Tisha. Now this is right up my alley. This type of, it looks like they're in mountains. You know, they're wearing fur coats and parkas, and they're in a cute village. This Tisha, the story of a young teacher in the Alaskan wilderness. Oh, a condensation of the book. So this is the thing, is I read only the Reader's Digest version of this book, but I spoiler, I love this book so much, Tisha, that I am going to buy it one day, like an actual copy, because I plan on buying it because I just love it. And it's just so fascinating. It's this incredible story. Wow. just a second. Oh, it's okay. So it's about this woman. Let me go and actually show you the photo, her photo. But even the images in this book, they did a really good job of like kind of showing you what it would look like. I mean, oh, they're about to kiss by the mountains. The frosted over snowy mountains, and there's wolves present. I mean, this is right up my alley, like this type of story. But they have a photo of her, I believe, in the back of this book. The woman who told this story. Yes, they do. Anne Hobbs is the one who went through all of this. She tells her story about how she, in the 1920s, okay, so imagine that, the 1920s, she must have been in her 20s, I think. They said that in the book, but she wants to be a teacher, and she hears about being a traveling teacher, and so she goes to Alaska to be a teacher, because she also had an interest in traveling and teaching somewhere else in the world. And so she finds a teaching job in rural Alaska, specifically this town called Chicken, Alaska. And it is kind of her tale of how, like her tale of being a teacher in this very rural town in the 1920s, where there wasn't a whole lot of funding. She taught in this one-room schoolhouse where she also lived, and they were all sat by fire, and her house had like holes and little creeks in it that had to be repaired. She came there with almost nothing, and the townspeople had to help her by providing items for her. But the real heart of the story is that there is a lot of racism going on in the town at the time. And, it's the 1920s. It's way back in history. And so she, it's like kind of about how she stands up against that and sort of rebels against the racism against the natives there, a lot of the Inuit people that lived in the town. And how the people surrounding kind of viewed their education as being less important, and how she stood up against that and stood up for these two children as well who desperately were needing an education and who were struggling financially. And struggling with sickness as well. It's a very good story. If you love, and it's true, it's the thing too, which is incredible. They were saying that Anne Hobbs, again, here's her photo. They were saying it was kind of incredible because she has a really good, like a really strong memory when they talked to her and documented her story, because she was able to even remember details. Like they got the story from her when she was an older woman, you know what I mean? Like at this stage in her life. And she was able to recount and remembered very vividly all of the little details, even the trip up there. The trip up to the little town was strenuous and something that she had never experienced before. And even the difficulties riding the horse, and how, through extreme weather conditions of the Alaskan wilderness. So if you are into stories about the Alaskan wilderness, if you are interested in stories about teachers, even if you are interested in stories about the 1920s, or man, I mean, dog sledding is in this. You really get a good depiction of what the Alaskan wilderness was like at the time. And the people at the time who lived in Alaska, what they were like. It's amazing. And then after I was done with the book, I looked up the town, because obviously this is like a real life story that happened to this woman, which when you get done reading it, it's like shocking that that was real, because it's quite a heroic tale, truly. She goes through some kind of insane hardships through her being vocal and even falling in love with somebody who she's technically not supposed to fall in love with. And it's quite a heroic tale. It's pretty spectacular. And I don't want to give too much away, because if you want to read it, it's so good. And I'm sure that the full book is even better. I guess it makes sense that this is a Reader's Digest, so it was a condensed version of the story. I had wondered. But it was fantastic. So if you're interested in any of that, any topics like that, I recommend giving it a read. It was really good. And the only thing I will say is, like, in the book, there was so many moments where she would try to almost even educate a lot of the children who were brought up being racist, kind of educating them on a different way of thinking. And it's like, obviously looking at it through a lens of somebody who is in the, who exists and lives in 2024, almost 100 years, if not 100 years difference. Sometimes I was like, man, I'm surprised she doesn't snap back at them or say this to them or whatever. But then I really had to check myself and be like, well, right, she lived 100 years ago when her job and physical safety were on the line. She was in a rural place by herself. The trek back was days and days. The only person that she really knew there was herself. It's like, there's that aspect. And two, it's the 1920s, where even the things that she said were quite drastic for the time. They were quite radical. And when I look at it through that lens, it made a lot more sense to me, and it was, I guess, easier for me to just put aside my my modern takes on it, or my modern eyes. And the adventure aspects of this are very thrilling, because you go on so many real adventures in the Alaskan wilderness and experiencing what it's like going up against the wildlife, but also the terrain. The terrain is sometimes the hardest aspect of it in this book. And she does a really good job, or it wasn't even her who wrote it, he just got the story from her. Robert Specht. I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. S-P-E-C-H-T is his last name. But, where was I going with that? But, I don't remember what I was just saying. But it was a very good book. And I recommend that you read it. Give it a read. Because I'm going to be buying the full-length book. And I think it's going to be one of my favorite... I think it is one of my favorite books, even just reading the condensed version, because it was quite a tale, quite a story. And there's a lot of really clear, good depictions. This is what I was going to say. A lot of good, clear depictions of what the poverty was like there. And when you look it up later online, that's what I did. I was like, oh, this is a real life story. Okay, is there photos? Is there, you know, and there are photos. There are photos of her schoolhouse and what that looks like. And there are photos of the community center where they all had their parties. And it is kind of interesting because you really get to see what the poverty really looked like. Or, you know, in their case, it's so funny because a lot of the photos are of the places where everybody was communally, and that was technically the wealthier spot of the rural areas. There were some spots that were in deep poverty and had severe sickness. I think it was tuberculosis that she was saying that a lot of them had. But that's interesting, and in seeing this and how much of a shack each of these buildings were, and then thinking about how those weren't even the places of poverty, it's very interesting to think about. And yeah, I love that. So I love that you can look this up and hear more information about the story. I think technically you can visit there in real life, but not many people do, I think. And they said like only 3 people live in the town of Chicken today, or something like that. Very little amount of people still live there, which is crazy. But all the buildings are still up there, all the way from the 1920s. So anyway, I hope you give it a read. If any of that sounded interesting to you, it's quite a heroic tale, and I love it so much. I want to just talk about all of it, but I don't want to spoil it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't want to spoil it. I just think that you should read it if you like any of those things.